Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. On the phone with me today, I have Dr. Heidi Stieglitz Ham in Houston, Texas. Heidi is the CEO and founder of Spectrum Fusion, a charitable organization dedicated to improving the possibilities of those with autism. Heidi has a PhD in psychology from the University of Edinburgh, and she was a professor at the University of Queensland in Australia. Heidi, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. I look forward to having a chat with you.
I keep hearing this term neurodiversity very often lately, and it's being thrown around in a lot of talks and, on the internet. When it comes to the workplace, what does that term neurodiversity really mean?
So neurodiversity, it really just means that we can't expect every brain to be the same. So it's an idea that we do have a limitless variation in our cognitive functioning, across the population. So it's instead of thinking of like a medical model where we have to cure or something's wrong, we think, okay, this is a difference. Let's unleash the potential. Let's speak about these brain differences and really understand what's going on to help maximize their potential.
I like that you mentioned unleash the potential and maximize the potential, because I think sometimes when it comes up in conversation, neurodiversity is talked about in a way, or having these differences is talked about in a way that's somewhat negative. So it seems like through your work, you really are looking at ways to leverage those strengths as opposed to focusing on the things that may be more tricky.
And, if we think about like individuals who are dyslexic or on the spectrum or have ADHD and have depression, or, that's approximately, if we think about 10% of the population. So if we don't embrace these differences, we're going to lose out on a lot of talent in the workplace.
Wow, 10%, that's quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you gave a TEDx talk, which was great, about creating a sustainable living community for adults who are on the autism spectrum. And I'm curious, when it comes to getting a job, what do you find is one of the biggest challenges that professionals who have autism face when they're going to get a job?
Okay. And this is something that we face every day, because the expectations of the job and the requirements and the workspace environment, everything is designed for the neurotypical applicant. So, individuals who are on the spectrum, they may have difficulty with like paperwork overload, things like that, but they may be victims of workplace bullying, or often, they share ideas and they overshare. They may share their intellectual property. So sometimes in academic institutions, people just take their intellectual property because they're sharing it, right? And one of the adults that I work with, I really like that he said, I can actually do the job. He was a teacher, but he said, but I can't do all the peripherals. And I thought that was a really great way to think about it. So sometimes it's everything else that goes around, with the policies or with, even with onboarding, getting into the corporation or the company. So those are the kinds of struggles that we see.
That's interesting. You mentioned the workspace environment. I recently toured a company and kind of looked around at this organization and just was really interested to walk through it, walking through the building. And they had big open spaces with tables kind of just out in the open, so no cubes. It was a very open space. And I think that the idea was that it gets people talking and it gets people working together. But I immediately thought, wow, at least for me, I don't think this would work very well. I really prefer to have walls. And is that what you mean when you mention the workspace environment, or is it something else?
Well, it could be many different areas of the workspace environment. So, yes, so having spaces like that, or do you have a place that you can go if you need to write or if you need to read? When people think, they have anxiety, they only want to be in the cube all the time. No, that's not true. I mean, so they can give presentations, but when they need to focus, they might need to say, okay, I can't be disturbed at this time, or, I need to go to a quiet place. Because some individuals have difficulty with attentional processes. So, for example, if they're focusing on one thing and they have to, have their attention diverted to another task, it may take them longer to refocus back to that. So even if somebody comes up and says, "Oh, yeah, do you mind, just checking this real quick?" Or, every time they interrupt, that can really derail them for a long time. So, but they, also working with them to see what they know works best for them.
Absolutely. I wonder if you were to talk with someone in this situation, like if we're listening and we are a neurodiverse individual, would you see us telling the employer right up front as we're interviewing, like, I have this issue, I need accommodations, or would you wait until later in the interview process?
Well, this is a very important topic, and it actually is highly personal. It really is, because some individuals, they are, and this is where parents can discuss this with their child as well, because they are hesitant to disclose, because they think, okay, once I disclose this, they're going to see me through this filter of disability or disorder and not see all of the amazing things that I can do, or, the design, I can design products, or I can, all those creative things. They're just going to say, oh, yeah, we might not be able to. All right, so let's say you don't want to disclose and you're looking for a job. Well, then, if you do disclose, you may have opportunities with different kinds of organizations that could provide support or job coaching. But if you don't disclose, which a lot of people, they want to try it first, they may not disclose, and then they may even fail just in the beginning with the interview process. And they may fail again, and they may fail again, and they may fail again. And, of course, this really erodes their self-confidence and self-esteem. But if they don't disclose and they end up in the position and they are struggling, sometimes they get fired without any real notice. And that, of course, it really affects their self-confidence and self-esteem. So if there's a company or an organization, a business, and they are, they're learning about neurodiversity, they want to hire people on the spectrum, I found that when they do disclose that, then you can have some open conversations, and, we found really nice outcomes with that. I was speaking with one individual. He is now living in Germany. I just spoke with him the other day. But he said when he was in his job, he was having such a difficult time doing some of those kind of tasks that I was talking about, the peripherals. And he would have to have people under him doing that. And there's a lot of shame with that. But I think if the company understands, says, okay, we're not going to belittle them because this is a difference. We understand this is a difference. I think that would just really free up these individuals to feel like they really can be themselves, that they have a place to belong, that they can really unleash their own creativity and meet the expectations and surpass the expectations if they don't feel like they have to hide who they really are.
I like that. And I like how you mentioned that it's a difference as opposed to describing it in some other way. I really like that. Well, you gave a South by Southwest talk really recently, and it was called Find Hidden Talent, Autism in the Global Workforce. And I'm curious, have you noticed that there are certain industries or certain job types that are more open to people who are neurodiverse?
Well, okay, so this is where we kind of get into some of the stereotypes, because even if you ask anybody about autism or adults with autism, and they say, oh, yeah, they like computers, math, science, or they may be like a socially awkward genius. And yes, we do have individuals like this. They do exist, but we have the rest of the spectrum. So we have individuals who are creative, writers, artists, musicians, designers. So, companies like Microsoft and Hewlett Packard in Australia and Ultra Testing, that's a software company, they are, attracting individuals who are interested in, they are more procedural, or they are engineers, or they're software, they're tech coders, whatever. But then this is where we find a little bit more of a challenge with the creatives, because if you think about anybody who's creative, if you have, you have a degree in art history, or even if you have a degree in media production, you don't just walk out and say, okay, here, I'm going to break into media. So that's why we launched this program. I launched it called the Reactor Room Program. Mm-hmm. And so the Reactor Room Program is a combination maybe of a think tank or Shark Tank, but basically an individual is referred to us, and we meet with them, and we understand, why sometimes they're in limbo. Like, are they stuck? Why are they stuck? Do they have a skill? Do they have a talent? Do they have a passion or an idea that they want to develop? Do they already have a degree? And so we bring in a panel of individuals and professionals just for that person. So for media production, we'd have somebody from a film commission. We'd have somebody, an entrepreneur, a business person, a community connector. And then the community in general is there as well. And we come together to share, like, this is a connection, this is an idea, this is how we can then move to new pathways, and they can start something, because they may end up with a shadowing opportunity or an internship or a job or a creative venture. And so one of our early Reactor Room participants, he has a degree in media production. So we had somebody from the Houston Film Commission on his panel, and but he said, okay, I want to show that I can produce a show, I can do something in pre-production, post-production, I can edit videos. So every week now we have a show called Can I Cook It? And it's not for him, it's on YouTube, but it's not to become a YouTube star. It's to show, hey, I'm building a portfolio. And this is now providing an opportunity for an employer to say, hey, I'll hire him to film our videos. Everybody needs, all these corporations now, they tell their stories. So it's, we don't have to even just think of video production just in terms of, something like in a movie. I mean, everybody needs video.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
anyway, he's had some opportunities with that as well. So those are the kinds of ways that we're trying to circumvent, if they don't have a direct link to a job, how can we get them there through the support of the community and secure employment at the end, or whatever the end goal is for them.
Oh, that's great. And what age group does this program typically work with?
So 18 and older. And also I want to say, so it is a social impact initiative as well, because it's addressing a social issue, which is children are reaching adulthood in, record numbers, but we don't have, we're not ready for them. We don't have the opportunities for them. And so we are not charging the individual themselves, because some of these families, they're already taxed. So we remove that financial barrier for access to connections, because some of these individuals, they would never be able to access, okay, here I'm going to meet with the head of the Houston Film Commission, or I'm going to meet with an art gallery owner. We're able to connect them to people that they would never, ever be able to meet.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I will put information about this in our show notes. So if someone is listening today and they want to check it out, they'll be able to find you and find the Reactor Room program.
Yes, and this is something we can bring to other cities as well. So we're developing that. So if somebody says, hey, we're ready to bring that to our city, then they can start that. So we're getting that all organized as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, so if we're a parent working with our adult child who has autism, and they're struggling to find a job, but maybe, something like this program is not available in our city, how can we help that adult child who is struggling?
Okay, so first of all, I think sometimes we think, okay, they need a job. We're going to go in, and it depends. Like if they're on disability, there are traditional services, and so they have, Goodwill, Connections, Target, things like that. But even with that, we have to really understand their cognitive strengths, because even in the very beginning, if they are in a position that doesn't suit them, they can have a really terrible experience that can be traumatizing. And so I work with one individual, and when you look at his neuropsychological profile, it clearly shows like he has difficulty with tasks that require like really focused, sustained attention. And the longer he has to attend, the lower his accuracy. Well, his job is all about attending to this, these details, and he's becoming very depressed. But everybody's saying, oh, well, he has a job. He should, that's great. But this is not going to, even though he has a job, this is really not suitable for, his long-term mental health as well. So I think, number one, even if it's a job, okay, look at that. But number two, then we'll look at, talking about the diagnosis and disclosing, because if you have, if you already are on disability and you can go to traditional services, that's one option. Also, many cities now are starting their own kind of job finding services for adults with autism, and they provide job coaching. So again, if you disclose, you can have a job coach, you can, they'll help you. And if you don't disclose, again, that's kind of where we were saying that, it could be, it could end in a situation where you're not valued, or you don't feel respected or appreciated because you're trying to do something that's out of your area, or you're not being supported in the way that suits you best.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, so also, maybe let's back up a little bit in time. If we're listening and we have a child who's either in high school or college, and let's say they're very, highly intelligent, high functioning, but they are, on the autism spectrum, is there anything that we can do as that parent to help prepare that child for the future workforce that's eventually coming down the road?
Okay. So, well, first of all, in the UK and Australia, Europe, the students take a gap year after high school.
Right.
And here, I've talked to so many of my students or so many individuals that I work with that say, well, I just knew I should go to college, and my peers were going to college, so I did. And if they do not have, if they're unsupported completely, so let's say they have, they're bright, and this is what we see a lot, but they have difficulty with organization, prioritizing, problem solving. These areas are called executive functioning. So sometimes these individuals do not fail in university because they're not bright. It's because of these executive functioning skills. So some universities are now, they have mentoring programs, they have systems in place. So number one, I would look for a university that could support them in that way, or two, see if services are available that you can enlist their help so that your student, your child will not be unsupported and fail, because that also, we know that has repercussions for the long-term financial, mental health, all of those kinds of things. But also, let's talk about their declared majors, because I have many adults, they gravitate towards degrees of psychology, but you need to have additional education after that. Or, they want to go into political science or art history, but then that's too general. So then I see people with multiple master's degrees and multiple PhDs, and they're still not working. So just getting a degree is not going to lead to employment. So then think about, okay, and then that's where we're actually helping with the reactor room, because these other degrees, like how can we get them plugged in? But before that, to get a degree that also leads to certification and employment is very good. Like if they can do engineering, which we know many of them do, or nursing or occupational therapy, but then if that's not an option, then, okay, what about a 2-year degree that leads to certification? Or what about like an ultrasound tech or drafting or radiology? And then the other thing is we can't overlook the trades and apprentice opportunities. And the other really interesting, I just met this woman, a CEO of an organization called Bridgeyear, and we are looking to see if we can do something together with them, because what they're doing for high school students, I think would be brilliant for individuals on the spectrum, is that they provide these simulations. And so somebody could say, okay, I want to have a simulation of what it's like to be a medical assistant, or what it's like. Because I've worked with people that say, okay, I want to be a massage therapist. And then they graduate and they say, no, I don't like to touch people. Or I want to be a nurse, but then they don't want to touch, the samples or anything. So, to give them this idea, like, okay, this is what it really would be like.
I think that's an incredible idea. Yeah.
And so
I really
we wanted to partner and do something like that.
That's great. I mean, I think pretty much anyone could benefit from this. I talk with people every single day who have gotten a degree, like you mentioned, just some degree, and didn't sort of think of where that degree would lead. And then perhaps they decided they don't like that career. And it's very hard to just sort of mentally think of what it is you want to study in advance because, you've never done the job before. So that's really wonderful. I'm so happy to hear about that.
And so even though those are, short simulations, it's still, you can tell in that amount of time, like, oh, no, that's not what I thought it was. And then that's the other thing that we're doing, too, is to help these individuals say, okay, somebody has an opportunity for them in shadowing, or somebody can give an opportunity for internship. And again, sometimes they are, if you have to do work or learn in a group setting, it can be a little bit off-putting, or you might have social anxiety and not like to learn in that setting. But, when you're one-on-one or doing an internship, then you can really understand more and determine if this is something you want to do.
Wow, that's very interesting. Well, I also wanted to share with you a listener question that I got, and it comes from a mother of a son with autism, and this son is finishing high school and going on to college. And she wrote me to say that she's noticed that sometimes folks with autism are considered to come across in maybe a way that would be interpreted as rude. And she's really worried about her child sort of in terms of the long-term impact of that perception as that child is looking for a job and is in the workforce. And she was asking, is there anything that she could do to help ease this issue for her child?
Well, see, and I do understand because parents, they're concerned, and the fear is that, like you said, the child or the young adult will be misunderstood and judged unfairly and not provided opportunities, and maybe friends won't like them. And, there's not one answer because, they don't want to maybe say, hey, give me a break, I'm on the spectrum, or, some people have these cards, but that's really not that easy. I think the best thing to do is to realize that, okay, we are getting that message out there about neurodiversity, but we can all do our part right now. Every one of us, we can do our part right now to make the world a better place for adults on the autism spectrum by being an example and everyday life to follow. And one thing that I love, and I'm sure many people love, Humans of New York, and I loved it from the time I first started following it. And one of the reasons, for this immense success is that we were able to see the lives behind the faces of real people and people we see every day. And so, if you think about, okay, here's somebody and they might look rude, but, I see that, they just visited their wife in the hospital, or they just had a breakup with their girlfriend. But I think once we get this attitude, because even in corporate cultures that are starting neurodiversity, I was just speaking with somebody yesterday, and she said, this approach has helped me personally, she said, and now she has a son with autism. She said, because now I view people a little bit differently. I have a measure of kindness, or I don't judge right away. And I think this is something that I know that there's organizations like kindness ambassadors and all, but we all have to start raising awareness and speaking about that to others as well. If you hear them judging, we hear people judging and criticizing people. Let's stand up. Let's say something. You don't have to say like don't criticize. You can say, well, one time I saw somebody like this and this really happened to them, and now I'm trying to not jump to conclusions or something like that. I think that's very important.
No, I think you're right. And I think, honestly, that can apply to many different situations, whether it has to do with autism or treating people more fairly in other ways. Having empathy and understanding people, it really goes a long way. Well, I'm curious, if we are an adult and we are already out in the workforce and we are struggling with issues around autism, are there groups, or where can we go for support if maybe we don't already have a support structure in place?
Okay, well, I just would like to do a shout out to an adult on the spectrum. Her name is Samantha Kraft, and she has a website called My Spectrum Suite. And if you go to her website, she has community groups that she she has a link to all these groups, to books, to all across the country, I think across the globe, actually. She's very well connected, and so I really like that it's from her perspective. And I think that would be a good place to start if it's for adults themselves. There are lots of online groups, and many individuals do like to get on these groups, but some of the groups are secret groups. And so if you go to Samantha's My Spectrum Suite, you can actually find some secret groups that you didn't know about that you can then, get support or feel very comfortable sharing.
Oh, that's nice. I think an online space can be really helpful because it's a little more confidential in a way and easier to reach out to people sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we're talking, the thought comes to mind of, I have had friends who maybe have different learning challenges over the years, and sometimes they end up becoming entrepreneurs because they can design their own work environment for what works for them. Do you find that works for some people who have autism, or is it maybe in a different situation?
No, that does apply very much so. And, we're actually working with somebody now. He has a job, and so we're not saying quit your job, but when he started saying, hey, I have this idea, I might be able to design something, he actually has an idea for an invention, and we are getting it to the working prototype now. But another one of our young adults, she's going to be launching a jewelry line. Now, and her family, they're going to be helping with the business side of things. But what I really love about this is that we are teaching her and we are empowering her to now start her own business. And she's a beautiful jewelry designer, and we're going to be launching that in this month. So yes, I agree 100% with that. And sometimes we can have creative ventures where, somebody in Wisconsin, they're starting a waste knot. It's for composting. And, that's something where we can have adults on the spectrum, everybody involved in that, people creating the schedule, picking up the bins, and organizing the payments. So that is really important. And I can give you a link to Waste Not as well.
Oh, that's perfect. Those are really wonderful examples. Well, in your TED Talk, you ended with something that I thought was just perfect, and so I wanted to bring it up. You said, it's a privilege to work with individuals with autism, and I want you to have this privilege too. And so I wanted to just take a moment to talk a little bit about some of the strengths that people who have autism bring to the workforce today. And could you share a few of those with us?
Yes, okay. Well, when I was sharing that quote, it was not only about their strengths, but actually about spending time with them and who they are as people as well. Because when we're working together side by side, one of the reasons that I love spending time with adults is that they are very authentic. Also, they are very loyal, especially when they feel that they belong and they're accepted. I mean, you won't have a more loyal employee. I think Will Purdy said that in one of his blogs. So the other thing is very refreshing. They don't have a hidden agenda, and so I received a text the other day, and it said, "Well, my birthday is this weekend, so if you want to do something fun on Saturday, that'll be fine." You know what I mean? No hidden agenda there. But then in terms of strengths and talents, yes, so, it runs again. So we have people in animation, fashion, coding, statistical analyses. So really it does depend on the individual, but because many of them, if they are very interested in what they're doing, they do have that laser focus. And so they can produce, a lot of a lot of deliverables, and if they are, inputting or doing something, coding or whatever that it is. But like for jewelry, it could be, designing the jewelry. I mean, this young lady has so many pieces of jewelry, and not one of those pieces is the same. Everyone has a different style, different bead, different pattern. I mean, to be able to do that, you have to be very, very focused, and you have to, really be passionate about what you do.
Oh, that's incredible. Mm-hmm.
And but I do love this quote. And again, Will Purdy said this. He's one of the adults in our program, and he said, "We are not asking the world for any favors, and we know that the world isn't fair. All we ask is that the world takes a moment of its time to consider us. Just consider us and see what we can offer."
Oh, I love that. That's just wonderful. And I feel like, I've been wanting to talk about this topic of neurodiversity for such a long time. I'm glad we were able to take some time today to consider it. Heidi, where can we go to learn a little bit more about you and all your work?
Our website is www.spectrumfusion.org, and we have Instagram, and our Facebook page is Spectrum Fusion US. We moved here from Australia.
Perfect. Well, I will include links to all of this information in the show notes so that if you're listening today, you can check out Heidi's website and some of the other resources that she mentioned. Heidi, thank you for joining me today. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
And thanks everyone for listening. Please don't forget to help me out, subscribe on iTunes, and leave me a review.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.